My name is Kylie Hitchcock, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation, where we will cover how to accelerate cloud data migrations to Azure with Komprise. Presenting, we have Carl Rautenstrauss, Principal Program Manager, Azure Storage, and Krishna Subramanian, COO of Komprise. Before we begin, I just want to cover a few quick housekeeping items. Should you have any questions throughout the duration of today's session, please feel free to submit them at any time using the chat box below, and we'll answer either during the presentation or at the end during the Q&A portion. Also, please be sure to rate today's session and provide feedback so we know how we're doing and can get new topic ideas. All right, I will go ahead and hand off to Krishna so we can kick off today's presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kylie, and thank you so much, Carl, for joining us. We're very excited to have this discussion, and we're going to show some live demos today, so it's going to be very interesting. So a lot of customers want to go to the cloud, especially now. The customers are trying to accelerate their journey to the cloud, but we often hear some key questions that customers keep asking. A key priority always, and even more today, is how can they go to the cloud and save costs? Sometimes customers are worried that when they go to an OpEx model, would their costs go up? So I think today we're going to cover how you can move data into Azure and actually save money while you're doing that. They also want to understand performance. When data is in the cloud, does it mean lower performance for users? And we're going to show you live how easy it is to access data from Azure and how Azure has different levels of performance based on the type of data you have and how Komprise works with that. We also often hear some confusion around what data should customers move to the cloud and in what order. Cloud migrations can be tricky, and a lot of times you want to figure out the right data sets to move first. So we'll show you how you can use analytics to make those decisions as well. And most importantly, moving data is hard. So how do you actually run your data migrations to the cloud? We'll show you how to do that as well, and then manage the data lifecycle. So those are the key topics we're going to cover. The whole idea of a live webinar is that it's interactive. So we love it when you guys ask questions. So please feel free to enter questions as we go along. But this is going to be an interactive session with a lot of live demos. With that, Carl, would you like to give some background on some of the key technologies that Azure has?
Excellent. Krishna, thank you so much. And wow, you could not have said it better or highlighted more of what we hear from customers than what you have on this slide. We've done a lot of customer surveys as of late around COVID and response to COVID and how they're managing their businesses going forward. These are things that we hear consistently. And quite honestly, I've heard consistently as well over the last 8 years that I've been working with customers who are migrating applications and migrating parts or all of their data centers to Azure. So kudos to you. I mean, phenomenal job just listening to customer needs and really highlighting how you can help. And I think customers are going to be very enlightened as we go forward, not only around migration, which is the main focus of our presentation, but the lifecycle management capabilities that Komprise brings to the table are incredibly important as folks go forward with adopting and leveraging cloud services. And part of the reason for that is there's a really wide swath of services available to choose from just in the storage arena, outside of everything else that you have available to you in public cloud from a database platform, an application architecture decision point perspective. And we provide multiple tiers and types of storage to give you the proper blend of price versus performance. But targeting that right solution for your data set is something that you honestly need help with to be happy and to avoid cloud remorse for service bills that are higher than you expected because the tiers of storage and the tiers of service weren't necessarily chosen well up front. So we're going to really focus on that. There's some great tools at your disposal, and boy, does Komprise provide a really complementary solution to what we offer in Azure. Now, I mentioned we do have multiple types of storage. We're going to focus today on our file storage types, so traditional SMB, NFS protocol access services, and then also our object storage platform, which is REST API based. You access object storage through either a tool that knows how to execute the gets and puts, the equivalents of reads and writes, or you write a new application to use that form of storage. And Komprise gives you a really good, really creative way to leverage that, that type of storage and the economics behind it. So what I'm going to show you during a live demo here in just a few minutes is our Azure Migrate solution. So as customers work with us and they want to migrate different types of applications, be they web applications or traditional VM server-based applications, database platforms, even analytics platforms that are based on Hadoop, we offer a great suite of tools that can help migrate those applications, those OSs, and the data that is present on disks, either virtual or physical, into the Azure cloud platform. But there are two areas where we don't have any native solutions that are sophisticated and enterprise class to help you safely copy file data. And that's where our partnership with Komprise comes in. Komprise has an amazing source array portfolio list that you'll see during Krishna's demo. And then we partner with a partner called WANDisco for migrating Hadoop's data sets to Azure. Very different. You know, the reason I have both listed here is they're complementary. They don't overlap at all. And this can make your process of understanding what you need to migrate and where drastically simplified versus the robocopy or rsync scripts that some of us have tried to use in our past lives with varying levels of success, myself included, right? I need to raise my hand on that. And then when migrating to a NAS equivalent in Azure, it's important that you understand the options that we have. And two of those options are here on this slide. Both are managed file platforms, meaning you don't have to worry about servers and updating operating systems or provisioning a new version of a NAS operating system, upgrading, all of those activities that are involved with typically managing a file environment. What Azure Files and Azure NetApp Files give you is a service that results in an SMB share and or NFS mount point that you attach to your server or Kubernetes environment, for example, and you have those enterprise class NAS capabilities. And Komprise can help you understand what tier of performance you need within these two different offerings and which one is the right one for you. Because you can see in this eye chart, and I apologize for that, there's a really good breakdown of the differences between the two from a performance and capabilities perspective. So upfront assessment is really, really critical to making sure that you have a good experience going forward and a price point that's going to meet your budget needs. So I am going to switch over to a live demo here. And we're going to share out my screen. Just want to confirm really quick with Krishna that this is showing. It is presenting.
I don't see it yet. You may have to just switch to the screen share tab, Carl.
Okay, let me do that. I might have tapped it too lightly here.
Yeah, we see it
That
now.
is the drawback of a touchpad, folks. Excellent. All right. Well, I wanted to highlight really quickly that Azure Migrate portal, that Azure Migrate service interface that I mentioned earlier. And this provides a really, really simple way to assess your current server environment, database environment, virtual desktops, and web applications, and then offers tools to migrate them to Azure in a fairly seamless fashion. And I say fairly seamless because, like anything, there is a cutover that needs to happen from your old environment to your new environment. So there will be a little bit of application downtime, application outage time while you're doing that. But this platform gives you the information you need up front to know you can move something and exactly how it maps to Azure equivalent instances to get an idea of exactly what the monthly cost will be for running a database or a server-based application environment based on the work that's been done up front to capture performance statistics and capacity statistics from your environment, import those, run the analytics, and present you with a clear report that doesn't lead to any surprises down the road. But as we go back and we take a look at that home screen, you'll see that one really important thing is missing, and that's assessment of your file environments and a tool, an enterprise class tool, to migrate those files to Azure. So we are working with the Komprise folks to have them added to our suite here, so that as you explore more scenarios, you will see a files option, and you will be able to very, very easily incorporate Komprise into your overall migration plan to Azure. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean that you can't move forward. Komprise has a solution in the Azure Marketplace you can easily select and leverage. And I'm going to turn it over to Krishna now to walk you through some more of the Komprise fundamentals and share a really cool demo with you. Krishna, thank you very much. I'm going to stay here, hang out, and we'll probably chime in every once in a while as the backseat driver that my wife and my teenagers accuse me of being at times. And thanks again for the opportunity. This is great.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. As Carl showed you, when you want to analyze, migrate, and manage data lifecycle of your files and object data, that's where Komprise works with Azure. So we do a few different things, which we're going to show through the demo. We help you understand what you have in your environment so you can pick what data you want to move into Azure. We do the data migrations. I'm actually going to first show you how you can migrate a share from any on-premise NAS that you have into Azure files. And then once data is in Azure, you can also do ongoing lifecycle management by like archiving it from file to blob, and if it gets hot again, promoting it back to file, etc. And through all of this, you can search and find your data across your cloud and your data centers. And we'll show you how you can do that as well. So we're going to do a live demo that shows all of that. And customers generally use Komprise with Azure to save costs. A good example is this clothing company, Carhartt, which some of you may be familiar with. They had a situation where they either had to buy more storage and backups, or they could transform to the cloud, and they really wanted to go to a cloud strategy. So using Komprise, they actually, in their case, they're taking cold data from their data centers, moving it into Azure Blob first. They were able to save 60% of their costs by doing that. And now they're looking at their hot data and moving that as well into Azure. So we're going to show you how you can do these things with Komprise. Just a little bit of background about Komprise itself. We provide data management software, and we were recently picked as a leader in this unstructured data management market by analysts like GigaOM. And we have customers using Komprise across a variety of NAS and object environments. So we support all the network attached storage that you have. So any storage that you can access via NFS or SMB protocols are storage that we can work with. And now we also migrate from any S3 storage. So if you have data sitting in an object storage that you want to move into Azure, you can migrate that as well. In the demo today, I'm going to focus more on going from a file storage on-premise to file and blob on Azure. But you can see, I'll show you in the demo, we support all the main NAS storage environments. And if you don't see your NAS here, you can just add it. So anything that you can access via NFS or SMB is storage that we can support. And the benefit of Komprise is that it's a fully managed software service. So you don't have to worry about scaling it. It's just like if you want the capacity on Azure, you just ask for it and Azure gives it to you. Komprise does the same thing for data management. You want to move a big file or a big share or small shares or thousands of shares, you don't have to worry about sizing all of that. You just give Komprise, the data that you want to look at, the data you want to move, and Komprise does the rest. It's an elastic service. It automatically manages everything. So you don't have to sit there and muck with tools like Robocopy or rsync. It's much faster. In benchmark results, you see Komprise is 27 times plus more faster than other solutions, and it's highly reliable. All the data that we move, Komprise preserves all the permissions on the data, and that's very important. And it also checks the integrity of every file. So it runs MD5 checksums on every file. So you get all of that. And it's a full solution. It's not just migration. It does analytics. It does ongoing lifecycle management and helps you do search and find as well of data. I'm actually going to bring up my demo right now. So bear with me for a second. While I do that, I don't know, Carl, if there's anything you wanted to add, but.
Yeah, just emphasizing re-emphasizing everything that you said there, Krishna. I mean, just so important to have this as a service offering. It's less to worry about. It's the reason why customers are moving to database as a service platforms, to file as a service platforms. I mean, there's so much to do on a day-to-day basis. It's really, really critical, and I think one of the most important things Komprise offers. And then that ongoing lifecycle management. Object storage is a great opportunity for you to save money on the cost of storing data, but the way Komprise allows you to do so means you don't have to take on a huge development effort to re-platform applications or retrain users. And just the capabilities are awesome, extremely valuable for customers, and you're going to see some of it firsthand.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and start my demo. So first I'm going to show you a migration, and then I'll go into the product and we can look at how you analyze data and all of that. Here we have Komprise running, and I just recorded this part so that you can see it more easily. You can see a lot of files getting migrated. But we're going to go ahead and migrate data from an EMC Isilon, from a share on the Isilon into Azure files. But if any environment that you want to migrate from, you can just add it. And you can see in this drop-down all the different environments I'm showing. I'm showing EMC, NetApp, Pure, and Windows file servers, etc. And we're going to take all the data from this share, and we're going to migrate it into a Azure file share. So I'm showing you that Azure file share mounted, and here I'm going in the Azure browser and showing you that there's no data there yet because we're going to do the migration now. So we have an empty share on Azure, and we're going to migrate using Komprise. So I'm going to pick that Isilon share as my source. I'm going to say I want to take the entire share. You could have migrated just some directories if you wanted, but I'm just going to move the whole share. I'm going to copy everything from that Isilon into my Azure file share, and that's it. I just set it, and I say I'm starting the migration, and then Komprise actually runs that migration. And when you're migrating a lot of data, you may have to run many iterations, and Komprise will do all that for you. So your users can still be using that Isilon share. They're still doing their work as usual, but in the background, Komprise is actually moving all the data, and if anything changes, it will run another iteration and move those changes. So it automatically does all that in the background. You can see that in this time, it already moved a lot of these files. Some of them are showing a 0 because it's still filling them in. On any data that Komprise has migrated, you can see that it's not only moved the file, but all the permissions have also been moved over. So you can see different users have different permissions, all that access control, everything got moved in Azure. So the exact same user permissions, access, the metadata of all your files, everything is intact. And here I'm just opening that file from Azure. But as a user, I don't know that. It just looks like a remote share. I double click and open the file, and it's seamless. So it's really simple to run a migration. You don't have to sit there and worry about everything getting copied. You don't have to worry about network being unavailable. You don't have to worry about permission mismatches. You don't have to worry about any of those things. Komprise handles all of that. And whenever you're ready to finish your migration, you can start a final iteration and then mark the migration as completed. Carl, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on the migration itself.
I mean, just awesome. And one of the things that we hear users asking for all the time, our customers asking for all the time, is an audit trail. They need to know that the files made it safely, everything was preserved, and that's just something that you don't get, at least in any usable form, from rsync and robocopy, alternatives to copying files. And when you're talking about terabytes of data, tens of terabytes, hundreds of terabytes, petabytes of data, that's totally unscalable. So the way you've made this so accessible, so intuitive, I think is really amazing. And I have yet to see anyone sit through this demo and not be excited about it. So awesome stuff.
It's great. Yeah, and there was a question that came in. I mean, you guys can keep asking questions along the way, but one of the questions was, what happens if the files are encrypted with something like, a hash algorithm? What would we do? Yes, we support encryption as well. Your data can be encrypted, and Komprise will move the encrypted files. You can also encrypt data in flight if you want with Komprise. Of course, you provide the key, and Komprise will encrypt based on your key, and you shouldn't lose your key because you would need it to get the data back. But it preserves everything, including encryption of your data. With that background, I'm actually going to switch and show a little bit more of a demo. I'm going to show you, I showed you how to run a migration. But let's say you don't yet know what you want to migrate. Then you can actually use all the analytics capabilities of Komprise to help you identify the data. So all you have to do to use the Komprise analytics is, just like I showed in the migration demo, you point Komprise at all the storage you want to look at by just giving the IP address of the storage, and Komprise will find the storage and will find all the shares in it. So for example, here's a NetApp filer, there's NFS and SMB shares. Komprise, discovered those, and then you could say, yeah, I want Komprise to look at them, I want to enable it. Once you do that, Komprise actually shows you very valuable analytics on all that data. So in this example, it's showing you that we have over 25 million files in this environment. It's 2 petabytes of data. But more importantly, we kind of see a heat map of our data. And we can see that a lot of this data sitting on these file shares hasn't been touched in a year or more. And this is pretty common with what we see with customers. In most environments, 75% plus of data hasn't been typically accessed in a year or longer. And that's data that you may not want to keep on expensive on-premise storage, especially if you're using something like Flash. Do you really want that cold data that nobody is touching? Do you want it sitting on the Flash? Do you want to be running backups on it every day? Because all of that is additional cost. So one thing you could do is you could find all that data with Komprise, and you can actually say, I still want to keep my important data in my local file server. And just this cold data, I want to move into Azure Blob. And you can set policies like that in Komprise. So it not only does migration of the whole environment, which is what I showed you first, you can do migration of an entire environment. You can also selectively migrate and archive data. So you could say, I only want to take the cold data from my on-premise environment into Azure Blob. So I want to take anything over a year old into Azure Blob. And you could set policies like that. And Komprise will actually show you how much you will save based on your own cost models. You can go in here and you can edit all the costs here to be your own storage and backup costs. And so you can play with this and see what would give you the best savings. So you can use it not only to migrate an entire environment, but you can also use it to archive some data into Azure Blob, or to put a copy of data into Azure Files or Azure NetApp Files or Azure Blob, etc. So you can do different data movement elements with the solution. Somebody was asking, can you show more of the data analytics? Absolutely. Let me actually show you all the different data analytics Komprise has. So when you look at this data and you see that, a lot of this data is cold, often IT doesn't know how users are using data. So you may want to understand a little bit more about this data. So you can do that. Komprise actually shows you a lot of analytics on the data. So it tells you what kinds of data you have. So you can see that in this environment, there's a lot of video data, and a lot of those video files are pretty cold. It also shows you whether you have big files or small files. And these things matter because when you're moving hundreds of millions of files around, you would do things differently based on your file sizes. And Komprise actually uses these analytics. It's not just showing you these pretty graphs. Komprise adapts to your data. It will elastically scale and manage its data movement based on the profile of your data. So it will do things differently if you have lots of large files versus if you have a ton of small files, or if you have very deep directories. So it adjusts its performance to your own data. It also tells you, do you have, who are the users, which groups are using your data, where the data sits, etc. So you have all kinds of analytics, and you can drill into this in different ways. You could pick, specific groups to look at. So maybe I only want to see all the data that my R&D group has, so I can just pick that. And then all this analysis is specific to just the R&D group. You can even go deeper. We have something called deep analytics, and you can set queries for any combination of information you want. So let's say I only want all the data for Project X. I want to see what happened with Project X, where is that data, who's using it, and I only want to see data over 3 years old. I can just put that query here, and Komprise will show you just the files that fit that query. So it's showing you that across all these shares, there's so much data for Project X, who's using it, etc. And I can actually go see the files themselves. I can see what those files are that are tagged as Project X, and I can then make operations on it. So it gives you all kinds of analytics on the data as you're looking at it. And whenever you're ready, whenever you're done with the analysis, you're happy with the plan you create, all you have to do is activate it, and then Komprise actually moves the data to your destination. Another question actually came in. When we move data into Azure Object Storage, does Komprise preserve the metadata, or does the metadata get stripped out on rehydration? That's a great question. So when Komprise moves data into Azure Blob, Komprise keeps all the file metadata with the Blob object. And that's very important because when we move a file into Azure Blob, that's what we call as archiving, we are keeping all the file semantics. We're also allowing you to natively access the Azure Blob in Azure. So when we archive, so we run this plan, we're saying anything over a year old should go into Azure Engineering. let me show you what the folder looks like with those files. I'm actually going to just open that folder. Give me a second here. So this is a folder, and some of these files are still are less than a year old. Some are over a year old, and they got archived by Komprise. And the files that got archived have a little arrow in them. I don't know if you can see that easily here, but other than that, they look the same. So this file looks like a PDF file. It's actually sitting as an object in Azure Blob, but as a user, I don't really know that. I know it's a remote file because there's a little arrow. Other than that, it looks like a regular file to me, even though it's an object, and I double-click on it, and it opens just like any local file would. So that's what happens. So when we move data to Azure Blob, we actually keep all the file metadata. And not only that, we keep transparent access to that data. So you can just open it, and it opens like a regular file because Komprise maps that object back into a file. So that was a great question. And yes, we keep all the metadata intact, and all that data can be brought back into your environment.
That was a great question, and that's somebody who really understands object storage and the fact that it's not, this is not a file share, right? Like you don't keep the ACLs attached to the file when it moves to object storage. So that was outstanding, and yeah, Komprise's capabilities are just so critical for any customer who wants to use the platform with some mix of traditional file storage access, right, in a hybrid style fashion. So that's awesome, Krishna, and a really good question.
Yeah, it was great. And the other thing is that because we keep native access of the data in Azure, what that means is that you could actually open it as a file in Azure without going back to the NetApp or EMC or whatever filer that the data came from. So with Komprise, there is no lock-in to any environment, including Komprise. A lot of times customers ask, well, once I use Komprise, am I stuck with it? Do I have to use it forever? No, you don't. You can turn it off at any time because all the data is in your own storage, and it's all in native format in all your environments. So Komprise actually doesn't put anything proprietary on your data, and nor does it require any proprietary lock-in from any storage file system. All your data is fully in your control all the time. Another question actually came in that's very interesting. The question was, can you get a preview on an image without downloading? And I think that's a great question. And here's how I interpret that question, and if I'm wrong, please ask a follow-up. When we move data into Azure, and you're trying to open the file, sometimes some systems, every time you open the file, they bring the file back. That's called rehydration. And you don't really want rehydration every time a file opens, because if it is getting rehydrated, a lot of stuff is coming back from the cloud to your on-premise. Then you have to keep all the storage capacity on-premise to let that come back, and it's really not saving you anything. So what you really want is when somebody is browsing files or they're opening files, unless it's really becoming hot and active, you really want to keep the data in the cloud and just access it and cache the access. And only if it's important, you want to bring it back. And that's what Komprise does. It leaves the data in the cloud. And in fact, that recall policy, you can set inside Komprise based on what you want to do. So you can say, for example, look, unless the data is read more than 5 times in 15 days, it's really not hot. Let it be in the cloud. And I just want to look at it if somebody wants to look at it, but I don't want to bring it back. If it's read very frequently, now it's getting hot, I want to bring it back. So you can configure that, or you could say only if it's written to, do I want to bring it back, because only then is it getting modified. Other than that, I don't care, let it be in the cloud. So that question on caching was great. And yes, Komprise allows you to configure your recall policy. It doesn't rehydrate data all the time. And that's a very important question. Again, somebody who really understands data management asked that question. And you can see the data without bringing back. There was another question that came in, and some of the questions related to the demo I'm just taking now. Some questions we'll answer at the end because I see lots of questions here. But one that asked about how does Komprise stub files during migration, I think is important. I just want to explain that while I'm showing the demo. Komprise actually does not use stub files. So let me explain what a stub is. So when we moved a file and you saw that the file looked like it is still here, in some technologies, they do this by putting something called a stub file. So they put something here that looks like that file, but it's not the file itself. And then they have an agent running either on your desktop or on the storage system so they can monitor if that file ever gets opened. And the reason we don't use stub files is because those things can cause problems. They're proprietary interfaces. They don't scale. They get in front of your hot data, and they can, because it's proprietary, a lot of things can go wrong with stub files. Instead, Komprise uses only standard protocol mechanisms. So everything we do is through standard protocols. Protocols have support for something called symbolic link. So just like when you write an email, if you put a URL in the email, your email application will know to turn that URL to a blue link, and if you click on it, it'll open because that's a standard in email. Similarly, file systems have a standard of symbolic links. Komprise uses that standard. And it has no static environment. So if somebody goes in and deletes these links, we can repopulate them. There is no context lost with the link. So Komprise gives you a resilient, dynamic, non-proprietary way to provide transparency. Okay, so I'm actually going to go back and finish up on the slides, and the rest of the questions we can take at the end, but these are great. It's great to have interactive questions, so we really appreciate all the questions folks are asking. Just in summary, Komprise enables you to analyze data, migrate data, and when we say migrate, we mean take everything from one place and move it to another place. But it also helps you archive data, meaning only some data we can move. And then it gives you a way to search and find and tag data and create a copy of data for cyber resiliency. And when we do all of this, we preserve native access everywhere. So your data is fully accessible by you across all your environments. I hope that was helpful. Here's an example of another customer that is using Microsoft Azure and Komprise. This is actually a county government. They have a sheriff's department that has body cams. Body cams generate a lot of data. And they also have courthouse records that they have to keep for 25 plus years. So they had a lot of data and they could not manage all of that in their data centers. Again, this is a great use case for the cloud. Azure has elastic capacity. So Komprise, is migrating some data to Azure for them and archiving all their cold data into Azure Blob. In fact, by doing this, they were able to reduce the size of their backups by 88%. And they were able to move to a better backup and restore solution and still cut costs by 72%. In fact, they upgraded their hot data all to an all-flash environment and upgraded their backup storage. And they were able to do all that and cut costs because they were only keeping the most critical data in their data centers. The rest was moving to Azure through Komprise. So that's this presentation in a nutshell. I don't know, Carl, if there's anything you wanted to add at the end before we take more questions.
Yeah, really one, and only one thing. I mean, the focus today has been on migration. It's top of mind for the customers that we talk to collectively, especially spurred on by COVID response concerns and the realities of what that's doing to IT departments across industries. But I want to make sure that nobody leaves without understanding the additional value that Komprise brings with being able to tier data that has to remain on premises, to tier it appropriately to cloud storage. And also, once you are running production data sets in the cloud, to tier within the cloud. Is that something that can be hugely beneficial to your month-over-month bills that you receive? Placing the data at the right time, on the right storage format, and the right performance tier. And I think the value that Komprise brings to folks on an ongoing basis is something that just can't be discounted. It's just so important. So yeah, thanks, Krishna. That's it. I mean, it's just awesome value with what you have here.
It's great. And if you want to try it out for yourself, please, you can, as Carl mentioned, we are in the Azure Marketplace, so you can access Komprise through there. You can also just get a free trial if you want to just see how this would work with your own data in your own environment. And the link to that free trial is here. With that, I'm going to actually ask Kylie. I know there's a lot of other questions I'm seeing. Kylie, I don't know how much more time we have and if you want to pick off some of these questions.
Yeah, we do have a lot coming in here and just a couple minutes left. So we'll answer maybe one more and then we'll follow up with the rest of you via email to make sure we get your questions answered. Let's see. Now here's one. Does Komprise dedupe?
Okay, that's a very good question. So Komprise is not storage. So it doesn't actually do dedupe on its own. The dedupe is dependent on the environment. So if you move into Azure NetApp files, for example, it does dedupe. So the storage usually does the dedupe. So it depends on the storage you're moving to. Komprise does optimize your data if you want us to. It does, chunking and compression of the data, particularly in some environments like media and entertainment. That is important. So it does optimize data from the data management layer, not from the storage layer.
Awesome. And one last quick question here. How do I get started?
Yeah, you can simply go and sign up for the trial, or if you want a deeper presentation, I think somebody said they'd like a deeper dive. Time is running out. That's perfect. I mean, just feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to provide you a deeper dive. I think I do see there are some questions about the whole rehydrate thing. Yes, I mean, if you have more detailed questions and you want to understand how we are able to preview files without rehydrating, we'll be happy to show that to you and have a more in-depth discussion on that. So feel free to reach out to us.
And Krishna, if the customers go to the Azure free trial link, will that give them an opportunity to be contacted by Komprise and schedule those deeper dives?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Thank you, Carl. So if you just fill that out.
No worries.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the best call to action.
Perfect.
Yeah,
so right
it's great to see
this
interest
here,
from folks. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Lots of questions coming through. And as I said, we'll be sure to follow up with all of you via email. Reach out to us if you have any more questions along the way. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Carl and Krishna, for presenting.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carl. This was wonderful. It's great to have
Krishna,
you on.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. This is it's a fantastic partnership, and I can't thank you enough for letting me participate.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.